Hello, and I'm so happy you're here to watch today's live stream sewing lesson. I'm Megan, and I teach sewing. I've been teaching it for a long time, and I have a business called Hipstitch Academy, and every single Wednesday I go online on YouTube and do a live stream sewing lesson. In today's sewing lesson, we are going to make this maxi skirt. It's a free pattern provided by Simple Simon and Company, and we're gonna make it right now. I just wanted to say I do teach sewing classes. If you're here and you are a complete beginner and you're watching this either live or you're watching the video replay of this and you don't know how to sew, but you're like, I really want to learn how to sew, I do have a Learn to Sew sewing class coming up. It's taught on Zoom. It's Wednesday nights, and it's going to be starting on Wednesday, July 7th. It goes for 4 weeks. It's called the Learn to Sew Lab. It's a class or an iteration of a class that I've been teaching for a really long time, and for the last year and a half have been teaching it on Zoom and have successfully taught a lot of people how to sew, not in person, if you're skeptical. Yeah, it's definitely a class that can be taught online as long as you have a sewing machine. Have the sewing machine, have the fabric and supplies that you need. That is very clear on my website, everything you need. And I will make sure that you walk away from that 4-week class learning how to sew. All right, so let's get started on this maxi skirt. If you've downloaded the pattern, you will have something like this, or if you've taped it together, you'll have something like this. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of pages that you have to tape together. It's only about 12 pages, which in the world of patterns is not that big. So we're gonna go with it. It's a maxi skirt. If you don't want it to be maxi, figure out where you want it and cut it off. If you want it to be mini, cut it off about there. If you want it to go down to your knees, cut it off about right there. I am gonna do maxi. I have my fabric pieces cut out, so I'll show you. You're cutting this piece on the fold, right? So this is half of the skirt, and I'm showing you in this view because it's so big, it'll be hard to show you on the table that I normally show it on. Anyway, this is half. You're cutting the fabric on the fold so that it becomes a full piece of fabric, and it goes down to the floor. So that's my back. This is my front. This is literally like a piece of polyester knit that's probably highly flammable that I got at the thrift store last week for like $1. You know, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but let me snag it. And then I was like, ooh, this would make kind of a cute maxi skirt because it's knit, but it's like super flowy and it has this great stripe. And so I think it's perfect for this project. We'll see. However, I am going to change something up. You know, I always have to make my changes. This skirt, in the instructions, they want you to use 2-inch wide elastic as the waistband. I don't have 2-inch wide elastic, so I have 2 pieces of 3/4-inch wide elastic that I'm gonna put together. And then I'm gonna cover it with a piece of the actual fabric. So I'm gonna take you through how to do that. It's not in the instructions, but it was something that I kind of just wanted to do. Because I think it'll look nicer than just having a regular piece of elastic. All right, I'm gonna sit down again. I do have my serger and my sewing machine set up to go today. So I will be working on both. So I will be going back and forth from my serger to my sewing machine. They're right next to each other. I'll try not to make you watch that transition too many times. And then, of course, I have my overhead camera that I will do pinning and that kind of stuff over here. So that's kind of the lay of the land. And the first thing I'm going to do to get started is to take my front and my back. And like I said, it's way too big to show you on the cutting table, but I'm just going to show you that I'm going to lay it down so that the right side is up. You can kind of see the right side is up. This is the top of my skirt. I'm going to take the back of the skirt and lay that right side down. So I'm matching up at the waist and I'm matching up down the side. I'm going to use my serger and sew this side, and then I'm going to sew the other side. And because I'm using my serger, I'm just not even going to bother to pin because it's just, it doesn't need to be. They're perfectly the same size, so I'm just going to line them up as I go, serge down to the bottom on both sides. So let me transition over to that camera so you can see what I'm doing. So here's the serger. It's nothing special. If you're not familiar with sergers, I'm happy to answer any questions. I mean, if I know the answer. I'm not super knowledgeable about sergers in general. I've been using a serger for a while, but actually not that long. I kind of went for a long time not getting one. And then I got one and I was like, oh my gosh, I love it so much. So yeah, it's just an inexpensive Brother model. And here we go. The pedal seems to have floated away. Okay. So I just keep my presser foot down all the time. And it cuts as it sews. So that if you're not perfectly aligned when you're going in, you are perfectly aligned coming out. And, some people will say you should sew before you serge. For this, I think it's okay. It's not going to have a lot of wear and tear on the seams. And my tension is, I think, in a good spot. So I'm only serging for today. To the end, you just kind of keep sewing so you get a little bit past and then you cut it. So now same thing goes for the other side. So I'm just going to take my time to line that up, get it started. A little bit better lined up here. Okay, so now I've got skirt that I've serged together. So it's looking like a skirt. It'll look more like a skirt if I turn it right side out. And back it up a little. So now for the waistband, I'm going to serge the bottom so it's all nice and even, and then turn up the edge 1/2 inch and hem it on the sewing machine. That's how I'll do the hem. But now for the waistband. All right, so like I said, I've got these 2 pieces of elastic, and the way that I figured out how long the elastic should be is I'm making an XXL, so I made the elastic 34 inches. And that's about 2 inches smaller than my waist. My waist is actually a little bit bigger than that, but it's a stretchy skirt. I think it's going to be okay. So 34 inches of elastic, and then I also made this waistband piece 34 inches long. And what's going to happen is once I connect these 2 pieces of elastic, I'm going to wrap. I'm going to kind of lay them in here. Next, they'll be butted up against each other to make about 1.5 inches worth of elastic. And then I'm going to wrap this fabric around, and then that's how I'm going to create my waistband. So the first step is getting these 2 elastics to be one thick piece of elastic. So I'm going to zigzag those 2 together. So change to a nice wide zigzag.
Here's what I found on the web.
Ooh, my phone is doing weird things. Okay, so I'm basically just butting them up against each other, and I'm going to be zigging and zagging across the middle. And you'll see 2 pieces of elastic will become 1. One thick piece of elastic. If you have 1.5 inch wide elastic, you can make that work. You can use 2 inch wide elastic as called for and still make this waistband. That's fine too. Different in length. That's okay. Sometimes it gets curled when you're measuring it, so that's how that happens. All right, so now I have 1.5 inch width elastic, and I'm going to insert this piece of elastic into my waistband. But first, I'm going to put my waistband into a circle. I'm going to do that before I wrap the elastic. So I'm folding it in half with right sides together, and I'm going to sew it, or you can serge it. I think just because my sewing machine is right here, I will use my sewing machine, even though I'm about to run out of bobbin, and I've got a zigzag on, so we're good. Always use the zigzag when you're using stretchy fabric. And I I tend not to backstitch when I'm using knits. It just gets caught in your sewing machine way less if you don't zigzag, or if you don't backstitch, if you're wondering about that. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with my piece of elastic. Put the ends together, zigzag them. I do backstitch when I sew elastic together because I just wanted it to be extra secure, and I've run out of bobbin, but I'm good. Okay, so here we've got our round of elastic and our round of fabric waistband. I'm going to flip this so it's doubled, and see here where you have the seam allowance, you can open that up or you can keep it to the side. I think I'm going to keep it to one side because it wasn't wanting to open up because of the zigzag. And I'm going to get that even all the way around. Okay, now the trick is getting this into it. So I just want it to be like at the top. So you know what, I'm gonna stick this pin here. It's probably not the easiest way to do this, but it's the way I'm doing it. And then, so I'm kind of keeping the ends of the fabric here together, but pushing this elastic up to the top. Okay, so stick a pin here. And it's going in between the layers. I'll make sure it's way up at the top before I sew anything. But for right now, I kind of just want to get the layers of fabric to be lined up on this raw edge first. So I'm just pinning that together. There we go. Okay, now it's almost like I can turn it upside down, make the elastic be right at the top. There's the top. I'm going to turn it around. And then here's what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some pins, and every time I'll push it, make sure it's right up against the top, stick another pin. And I'm going to sew right where that elastic ends. So I did make this band, started out at about 3.5 inches tall. I mean, actually 7 inches tall, and then folded it's 3.5. I don't think I'm going to keep it that tall because my elastic only goes to here, but I'm going to see. And by pinning the elastic and the fabric, that kind of ensures that it's going to stay up at the top where you want it. Okay. So when I sew around, I'm going to feel where my elastic ends. You can kind of feel that. And I'm going to sew right below it. Okay. So head over to the sewing machine camera, and you can take the storage container off if you have one like I do. I do need to put a different bobbin in. I've got a gray one here that will work, kind of grayish, khaki-ish, it'll be fine. and slide it under. Oops, I still have zigzag. So I do still want a zigzag, but I want it to be a super narrow zigzag. But I want it to go through a little bit faster than that, so I'm turning, making the length a little longer. So my foot is right up against this elastic. Elastic is securely in place. And here's a little trick that I usually do, or try to remember to do, is I'm going to sew just like a couple vertical stripes down the elastic. Just in a couple spots. And what this does is it will make sure that the elastic doesn't flip in the channel of fabric, because that really bugs me. So just every so often, you could put it on the side. I'm gonna just do every few inches. Okay with how that looks, because it will prevent my elastic from turning around. Let's stick one more. I don't want to do it actually right on the seam out, because my it's really thick right there, so maybe I'll just do it right to the side. Okay, now I have my waistband. I can take all the pins out at this point. I mean, this project, you can't get simpler than this. It's literally 2 pieces of fabric, and then if you have the 2-inch wide elastic, you sew that on. So I am making it a little bit more challenging, but even this is like super simple. Okay, so this is the part that we're doing here. Your top of your skirt and your waistband, in comparison, the waistband should be smaller than the actual skirt, which is the case for us right now. So that's correct, because you're going to be stretching the waistband slightly when you sew it in. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to find the 4 points on the top of the skirt. You've got your side seam here, your side seam here, and when you bring those together, you can find the front and the back really easily. So there's that. Here's that. And then same with this. I've got a side seam here. I've got a side seam here. I'm actually going to put pins on all 4 up here so it's not as distinct. And then find your front and back by bringing those 2 pins together. Stick a pin here and stick a pin here. Okay. Now, I think the easiest way to do this is to stick the waistband inside the skirt. So I've got to turn the skirt inside out. This is still my front. Turn that so that it goes right inside. And I'm going to match up pin to side seam. Put that together. Pin to pin in the middle. And then see, I've got a little extra skirt fabric, but as soon as I pull that, it stretches to be the right size. Same here. Pull that so it stretches. Pin. Next section, pin to pin goes together. Pull. And next section. Okay. Okay, so I've got my waistband inside. Now, I had mentioned that I've got a lot of fabric below the elastic. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a giant seam allowance. I'm probably going to take about a 3/4 to an inch seam allowance so that all that extra fabric doesn't wind up showing. Okay. So let's go to the sewing machine. I didn't really use my serger all that much, did I? I guess it's just sometimes easier to get on the sewing machine, especially for videos, just kind of all in the same area. All right. Maybe on this one I'll sew it and then I'll serge it after to get rid of some of the extra, because like I said, I'm going to take a giant seam allowance. So if I line up, let's see, I'm going to line up the edge of my fabric with this line here, and that will be my reference point all the way around. So make sure that I sew it evenly. And that's the biggest trick about sewing. If you're new to sewing and you're like, oh, my seams are never straight, how do I work on that? It's probably because you're watching what you're sewing and not watching a reference point. My reference point is here, so that's where I'm going to look while I sew. That's giving me the same distance here all the way around. actually, I don't know if you can see, coming back to where I started, and it's going to line right up with the stitching that I started with right here. There we go. Pull that off, and then you can see I have this giant seam allowance right now. So I am going to move over to the serger, cut some of that off. But before I do that, I just want to take a look. Looks pretty good. So I've got my waistband. I do have that stitching on there, which I'm okay with. If you didn't want that, you could always, you know, take a bigger seam allowance and only have that much of your waistband showing, but I think I'm going to go with a slightly taller waistband. But before I turn it right side out and try it on, I'm going to serge that edge so we've got that nice looped finished edge. Do a quick transition over to the serger. And once again, I never lift my presser foot on my serger. I just start sewing. And you see it cuts all that extra off, and it's gonna just wind up on my floor. Oops, you don't need to see my floor, you need to see that. So all that is coming off. And there's something really satisfying about like cutting off a huge chunk of fabric like this when you're using your serger. I don't know, it's just something about it. And now, here's my skirt, inside out, looking pretty good. This fabric is kind of hilarious. But I kind of dig this skirt. It's very vintagey looking. I actually might shorten it. I don't know. It's supposed to be maxi length. Oh, it's gonna suck me in too. Anyway, that is my maxi skirt. I will quickly hem it and then we'll call it a day. That was a quick live stream. Hang out with me a little longer and I'll hem it real quick. Okay, serger camera. Let's see. There she is. Okay, so when I hem this, and this is actually how she tells you how to do it in the instructions as well, is see what happens, and that's just probably a cutting thing. But by serging the bottom, you can kind of eliminate any what am I trying to say? You can even out anything like this. So I'm just gonna literally put that on the serger and go around the entire bottom of the skirt. And then I've got where I started in my sights. So I'm actually, I think, going to go past a little bit more just to kind of even that out. There we go. So I kind of did some serger magic, or just kind of freestyling there to even that out. And then on the sewing machine, the last step is going to be folding up the bottom, the serged edge. I'm still going to have a very narrow zigzag, but fold that up. Actually don't like the way that looks. I'm gonna switch my stitch to there. Yeah, I like that better. Wondering, I can see and feel how much is folded underneath, so I know I'm catching it. And I'm back to where I started. Pull it off. Let me just snip my threads. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that's it. And I think we did this in 40 minutes. And I tried my best not to rush this week. I felt like I rushed terribly last week. So I was trying to take my time. So what I'm trying to say is everybody can make their own clothes. This is a 40-minute maxi skirt. And yeah, it goes down to my ankles. Can't wait to wear it. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye.